And the Bucs hope that this will be their first victory ever.
We have a great area, a growing area, in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Sarasota, Bradenton, Lakeland, and Winnehaven, and even Wachoo. Over 2 million fans, and it's the fastest growing area in the United States.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, live from Tampa Stadium. For the first time ever in a regular season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers enter the stadium with numbers in both the win and loss columns. The Buccaneers came onto the field to a wild standing ovation from the some 60,000-plus fans at Tampa Stadium. They did not introduce any players individually. The PA announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, your Tampa Bay Buccaneers."
Welcome to San Diego, California. Super Bowl 37. It is Tampa Bay versus the Oakland Raiders. Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking, throws up the middle. It's intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
Tom Brady signing with the Tampa Bay Bucs tomorrow. Holy hell.
Everyone always says, why the Bucs, man? Why did you choose the Bucs? And it was a no-brainer.
Brady has all kinds of time. Throws toward the end zone. It is a caught ball. Touchdown, Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. 8 seconds, 7 seconds. Brady to throw. Throws a deep pass downfield. Got Scotty Miller in the open. Makes the catch. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Super Bowl 55 will be underway at Raymond James Stadium. Here's the snap out of the gun. Play action fake pass to Gronkowski. He's going to score a touchdown. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Holy guacamole. Bucs are the Super Bowl champs. They can't stop the clock. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them. I want to hear cannons. The snap to Brady. Brady looking. He may run. Brady has got a hurdle. He's got a first down inside the 25, and he slides at the 22.
He's fired up.
Tom Brady runs for a first down. Here's the snap. Brady hands the ball off, running to the left. It's Fournette inside the 25. Stiff arm to the 20. On his feet to the 15, 10, 5, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Leonard Fournette. Touchdown, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Whoa, is that the dagger? I hope so, with 20 seconds left.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
What is up, Bucs fans, and welcome back to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Live on YouTube today with some Tampa Bay Buccaneer news. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucs fan himself from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing quite well, and the first really little bit of actual news that we've gotten from the Bucs in quite a while. So I think really since the draft, really.
Well, it seems like we've been sitting around waiting for a couple of guys to get re-signed. Rob Gronkowski is always a topic. We spent a lot of time talking about that on the last podcast. We also spent some time talking about Ndamukong Suh. Those were like the two big names that everybody said, well, you know, it's time to either shit or get off of the pot when it comes to these guys. Like Gronk, it's hard to imagine this Bucs offense with Tom Brady there in 87 not playing, but Ndamukong Suh, we spent a lot of time talking about some other guys the Bucs could target. And when you talk about improving the defensive line, I think a move like the one that they just made today is a really good way of doing that. Some people consider it a lateral move. We're going to break down why I think it is an upgrade, but basically, if you were not caught up by now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers agreed to terms with former Chicago Bears defensive lineman Akeem Hicks. It is a one-year deal worth up to $10 million. Now, that's just what we've heard. There is no contract that has been signed yet. They have agreed to terms. So void years, incentives, what they are, all of that is still yet to come. But the fact that the Bucs are able to get a guy like this, I know injuries have hindered him a little bit these past couple of years, but I think he's got better pass rush chops than Ndamukong Suh, and he's a whole 3 years younger, which, believe it or not, at the defensive line position is certainly important. But I really like this signing. Your thoughts, your first impressions on Akeem Hicks in Tampa Bay?
Well, I mean, honestly, it was a bit of a surprise, just kind of out of the blue, right? Kind of out of the blue. And you're right. I think you hit the nail around the head where, he's an effective player when healthy, and we will get into what he brings and everything like that. But yeah, as far as this deal, it's important. Yes, the worth up to $10 million. That's how Adam Schefter, who broke the news, that's how he had tweeted it. So doesn't mean it's $10 million, and this cap hit isn't going to be $10 million. So for a lot of people wondering, I've seen a few people, oh, does this leave them room for like Rob Gronkowski, or does this leave room for another addition? While, we'll talk about whether another outside addition not named Rob Gronkowski is likely or not, it shouldn't really affect it that much because his cap hit won't be $10 million. Like his cap hit will be lower than that. So we don't know all the details yet. That'll be coming out within, the next few days or so. But what we know now is it's a 1-year deal. I think it's good for both sides. Akeem Hicks is 32 years old. He's looking to join a contender. And I think both sides sort of got what they wanted. He's more of I wouldn't really compare him to Ndamukong Suh as a player, like a player comp, but, you could say he's going to play the same position. And he also brings a little bit more pass rush juice, I think, than Ndamukong Suh. So while Suh may be a bit better at stopping the run, I think Akeem Hicks brings a bit more pass rush juice. And Bruce Arians at the Combine had mentioned that they wanted to get better at pass rush in the interior, more specifically. They wanted to get better there, more explosive there. And I do believe they had interest in bringing Suh back. It's not like they just said, hey, you're done. I think they really had interest. I just think when they weighed the pros and cons and with the price tags, I don't know what Suh's price tag is. It's probably around something similar to what Hicks got. When they weighed that, they decided that Hicks, was the better move.
And the way Ndamukong Suh has kind of navigated his contracts throughout his career, this obviously cannot be true. I don't have an inside source on anything, but I want to believe that when it comes to negotiating Suh's contract, the incentives are not going to be as easy to come by. Like, I don't know if Ndamukong Suh is going to take a $2 or $3 million a year contract. Not to say that that's what they're paying Hicks, but I don't even know if he's going to take her $4 or $5 million year contract if there are incentives added on to that. You know what I'm saying? It seems like he's going to be 35 years old. We've talked plenty about how he's a guy approaching the end of his career. And at this point, he kind of just wants to, get paid. And you've said it more than anybody else in this podcast. The Bucs have had a little bit of a habit overpaying him. And I just don't know if that's what they wanted to do this time, especially since there are some other positions that could still use some signings.
Yeah. And that's not my complaint with the Ndamukong Suh was never about the actual player. It was that I just didn't know if he was worth what he was getting. He was a productive player for them for 3 seasons, a quiet 3 seasons, really. You wouldn't think that he was with the team for 3 years, but here we are. And honestly, I figured he would come back. But like I said, the Bucs wanted something different. They didn't win the Super Bowl last year, in part because their interior pass rush and their outside pass rushers as well could not get home to Matthew Stafford in that divisional round game. Stafford had all day to throw, and with the Bucs offense being as banged up as it was, they needed a defense to step up. And the defense, while they were able to step up with some turnovers in the end, they got down 27-3. And part of that was the defense's fault. And they're hoping to get more pass rush from the interior. They re-signed Will Golson. Obviously, we know he's not really a pass rush specialist. I could see Hicks, being sort of a rotational type piece, more on passing downs, but it is a passing league now. So it might be depending on team, all right? When you're playing the Rams, Hicks may play more. When you're playing a team like the Bucs, don't play this team, but if you're playing a team like the Titans, maybe Hicks doesn't play as much. But it's also important, I think, to sort of talk about the role that Logan Hall now plays, because now his role is reduced, and I think it's a good thing. Joe Tryon's role was reduced last year, and I think that was a good thing. Doesn't need to come in and play 70-80% of the snaps. And like I said, I think that is a good thing. I like Logan Hall. I do think if Logan Hall needed to, he could have started from day one, and I think he would have been fine. But as far as development goes, I think this is probably the best path for him. Sort of string him along here a little bit, right? Let him get his feet wet. Let him get he'll get snaps, but he's not asked to do so much and be really the lone guy on that interior who's going to provide pass rush, because Vita Vea, everybody loves him. He's not a pass rusher. Will Golston is not a pass rusher. So if you were just relying on a rookie to do most of the pass rush abilities from the interior, I don't know how that would have worked. Now with Hicks in the fold, you can do a bit more, couple of different formations, and Hall doesn't have to take on as much of a responsibility.
I know you talked about Vita Vea isn't necessarily a pass rusher, and that's true. We talk a ton about him opening up lanes for other guys, but with Hicks having a little more pass rush ability to his game, I got to tell you, Todd Bowles loves to roll out a bunch of different fronts, 5-man fronts. Sometimes we'll see everybody get down on the line and 2 guys drop back into coverage who you did not see drop back. You know what? I guarantee you, I'm not a betting man normally, so I'm not going to put any money on this, but I guarantee you at some point this season, we're going to see Akeem Hicks drop back into coverage. Like
Probably. I mean, Suh did it. So if he's playing Suh's role,
right,
right.
But I mean, the defensive front that I am looking forward to the most, and I wanted to take a second and talk about, I think, the new life behind this defensive line going into the 22 season. I want to see Vita Vea line up next to Akeem Hicks. Like that's what everybody here wants to see, right? When you have got, I don't know, 650, 700 pounds of football player in the middle of your defensive line. I mean, good luck running on the Bucs this year. Good luck running on the Bucs anytime over the last few years. But with Akeem Hicks there, just opening another door for this pass rush. Joe Tryon getting younger at that outside position. And our buddy NFL God in the live chat brought up Shaq Barrett. Maybe we can speak to his expectations now. But I am excited to watch this defensive line. I feel like they've just gotten a lot better, shedding off some of the pieces that clearly weren't serving them late in the season last year.
Yeah, and some of that was, I don't know how healthy Jason Pierre-Paul was towards the end. Of course, Vita Vea suffered an injury against Washington, so he came back, but was he at 100%? Who knows? And I think I'm glad that the Bucs recognized this is kind of an interesting point that I've always had the mindset of, and I even had after they won the Super Bowl. Returning all 22 starters was great. Like, sure, like that's good. Like, yeah, a team won the Super Bowl, duh. When you do that, though, the word complacency comes to mind. And I'm not saying all those players were complacent. However, when you add a player like Akeem Hicks, when you add a player like Logan Ryan, when you add a Russell Gage, a Keanu Neal, those players are coming in. They're just a bit more hungry, And I'm not saying that the Bucs right now aren't hungry. I'm not saying that they don't want to win a championship. Trust me, they do. I'm just saying that I think the fresh blood, like scenario about this whole thing, I think that's encouraging. I think the Ndamukong Suh coming back, sure, it would have been fine. But I think the fresh blood along the defensive line with now Logan Hall and Akeem Hicks, and honestly, I don't think they will, but I still think they should sign a cheap veteran outside linebacker just for more depth. I don't think they will, but I like the fresh blood aspect of these players haven't been here. But guess what? They're hungry. They're ready to prove themselves, and they came here to win.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the players already on the roster don't want to win, but it's just something different about coming in and bringing in new pieces. It's the NFL. It's a business. You're going to bring pieces in and pieces are going to go out. That happens all the time. And I like that the Bucs acknowledged that and got not just depth pieces from other teams, significant pieces like Russell Gage and Akeem Hicks and traded for Shaq Mason. All those three guys, they're starters, like they're going to play significant roles for this team. If this team wants to win a championship, all three of those guys are going to play well. So I like that the Bucs are having that approach.
Yeah. Now, this next guy, I don't know. Well, I know for sure that he doesn't necessarily fit your fresh blood regime here, but I did want to get your 2 cents on this. We mentioned him last week, but I wanted to talk a little bit more. We talk about some extra additions they could make, some guys who are still unsigned, and some guys who could be brought back for cheap. And I say brought back because, you know me, man, I really like Carl Nassib. I don't know if he's going to be used as an outside linebacker in this defense because he's fucking huge. He's like 6'4", 6'5", and that would...
He would. I mean, he was already
he'd be a standing outside linebacker.
Yeah, he was already in Todd Bowles' scheme in 2019. So
okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I just think they like Anthony Nelson too much, and I think those two players are a bit too similar.
Somebody had actually mentioned, I don't know if it was on Twitter or somewhere else, but the Bucs did bring in Anthony Nelson to kind of replace Carl Nassib. And I kind of get the point of view you're talking about there. You still want to see a guy like that go out there and succeed. I'm sure the Bucs still have a good amount of faith in him, considering he is a Jason-like draft pick. So, yeah, man, I am incredibly excited about what this means. But we've spent a lot of time talking about Akeem Hicks. As we kind of wrap things up on him, let's talk about his health issues. We can talk about his productivity before his injuries really started to get him. I think it's been like the last 2 seasons they've really been bugging him. He's managed to get 7 sacks over the last 2 years, but before that, he was averaging 7-8 sacks a season. Like, this guy was a monster for Chicago, and if I remember correctly, he sacked Ryan Fitzpatrick when the Bucs played in 2018 up there in Chicago.
So 2016 to 2018, that 3-year stretch, Akeem Hicks actually made the Pro Bowl in 2018. That was his lone Pro Bowl season. Technically, I guess you could say he's a Tom Brady guy because he spent a little bit of time in New England. So before
like a cup of coffee in 2015.
Yeah, but before heading to Chicago. So he played 2016, 2017, and 2018 were his 3 best years in Chicago. And I mean, like, best, like one of the best defensive linemen, like, in football. 7 sacks in 2016, 8.5 sacks in 2017, and 7.5 sacks in 2018. Now, remember, that is from the interior. That is not a outside linebacker position. That's not a blitzing linebacker. And then it started to tail off because the injury. So after he makes the Pro Bowl in 2018, turns 30 years old, and he only plays in 5 games in 2019. The next season, he plays in 15 games, is 3.5 sacks. Good, right? Okay, all right. I don't know if you can expect 8 sacks from Akeem Hicks, but 3.5, whatever. And then last year, 9 games played. 3.5 sacks again. That's really good numbers. If you 9 games, 3.5 sacks. But it's clear that 2 out of the last 3 seasons, injuries have hurt him. He hasn't played a full season since 2018 was his Pro Bowl year. So yeah, I mean the injuries are obviously, and there's a reason that on May 31st that he was still available, right? Like if there was no issues and no concerns, somebody probably would have signed them for much more money, right? Like if there were no concerns, there's obviously some type of concerns here, but that's the risk you take. And I think the Bucs are willing to take that risk because if this guy, if he can play, not even all games, if he can play 14, 15 games and be healthy for those games, I think you are looking at a guy who can routinely impact the game on the defensive line. It just so happens that the injuries are something you're going to have to keep an eye on. And especially as he gets older now, I believe he turns 33 in November, I think, if that serves me right. As he gets older, those injuries, they might linger. So you never know, but that's always the risk that you got to be willing to take. Ndamukong Suh, I know a lot of people have brought this up even in the past few days. Ndamukong Suh hasn't missed a game, and I don't even remember how long, what the stat was. But, so the Bucs got a less dependable player here, right, in Hicks, but I think a player with a bit more ceiling in terms of what he can give you on the pass rush. And I think that's the most important. We know they can stop the run. Like, we know the Bucs can stop the run. Will they be the number one? I don't know. Maybe they weren't number one last year, but it didn't really seem to matter. Like, we know they're always going to be, as long as they have the guys like Vita Vea, Levante David, Will Golson, they're going to be a good run stopping team. That wasn't the issue. The issue was they couldn't get enough pass rush from their interior. That's what they're hoping Hicks brings. But the injuries are something you're going to have to keep an eye out for.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So we look at that rotation of D tackles on this team now. Guys like Vita Vea, Will Golston, Hicks, of course, in there now, Logan Hall, and Rakeem Nunez Roches holding it down in the middle of the line of scrimmage. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. As we take a look at another position group that the Bucs still could add to. I don't know if I want to talk about some guys that they could add because we did that a whole lot last week, but I want to get your thoughts on this. Who's winning that fourth wide receiver spot? You got guys like Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller, Jalen Darden still, I guess. Surreal Grayson, of course, still in there. But let's take a look at the offense now. And, let's talk about this because this is also something pretty interesting. I know I said last week I'm tired of talking about the wide receivers, but for now, let's just talk about the ones that are still on the team and that number 4 wide receiver spot as we get closer and closer to training camp. 100 days away from NFL football. Your thoughts on the wide receiver 4 competition?
Yeah, I think it's probably Brashad Perryman's to lose. Just heading.
Yeah, I can't believe
camp.
I didn't even mention him there.
I think it's probably his to lose. Now, I do think guys like Tyler Johnson, Jalen Darden, like they can have shots. I think even a guy like Scotty Miller, like they'll get shots. To do that, I'm a big Tyler Johnson fan, right? Like I like Scotty Miller. I really like Jalen Darden, but like I'm kind of prove to me that you can, right? Like prove it. I'm not going to rely on you suddenly becoming a productive player when you haven't done that quite yet. So prove it to me that you can. And sure, I'm not saying that those guys can. It wouldn't shock me if any of those guys ended up being the wide receiver 4. But I think right now, as it stands, and we have an entire training camp, an entire preseason to go through, right now as it stands, I would think Brashad Perryman would probably be the most likely guy. I wanted to answer a question in the chat by Charles Jansen. He mentioned we're going to go back to the defensive line really fast, and then we'll talk about a few other things. But he said, if Suh doesn't get signed, do you see him being brought back by the Bucs if injuries happen? Now, that would likely mean sometime in training camp or during the season. The unfortunate part is I think now that the Bucs have signed Hicks, I think Suh will be moving on rather quickly. There was a report that the Raiders had interest in Suh. I think that makes sense. There was a few whispers about Cleveland. That could make sense. So I think that by the time the Bucs would have to make that decision and could make that decision, where let's say Will Golston goes down and he's going to miss 5 or 6 weeks, hopefully not, but let's say that scenario, I don't think Suh will be available at that point. So I don't think that's possible. To back off of Willie's point, hard decisions will have to be made at wide out in August. Yeah, they're probably gonna be letting some pretty good ones go. They already did let one go today. Travis Johnson was a wide receiver who spent some time on the practice squad. The Bucs liked him. He was arrested.
Spent some time in county this morning as well. Don't forget to mention that.
He did not this morning. Yesterday morning. He was.
Okay.
He was arrested Monday early Monday morning for a DUI. So Todd Bowles had said that today he said that there's no longer with the team. So that's another, it was another guy who could have maybe stood out. But, that wide receiver competition will be interesting. Will they carry 6? Maybe, because if they carry 6, you can do Perryman, Darden, and then one of Miller or Johnson would have to go. Like, I don't.
When you're picking between Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson, I gotta believe Johnson's gonna get the edge there.
I would think so. Yeah, but
I know people really like Scotty Miller. Like, don't get me wrong. I know people love Scotty Miller, especially the new Patriots fans that just started watching a couple of years ago. But
he's joining them on 2.0.
Right. You would think Scotty was like wide receiver 2 on this team, the way some people talk about him. With all due respect to Scotty Miller, we will never forget his heroics right before halftime in the NFC Championship game to basically put away Green Bay in Lambeau. That was one of the best plays from that playoff run. I think the best play from the playoff run, the most impactful for sure. But I don't know, man. Somebody said it in the chat, but he is a one-trick pony. Towards the end of the season in 2021, I remember vividly, he got a few more targets than usual. Obviously, the injuries will do that. But one of the things that the Bucs coaching staff has said these past few years, I know Bruce Arians said this as well, you want to see him make like the gritty catches, right? Like, contested catches with Scotty Miller aren't going to be as frequent because I don't think Tom Brady's going to be throwing them to a guy who is 5 foot nothing. But when he did get those chances, he really didn't make the most of them. And it's kind of unfortunate because he is known for just running fast. And you got a lot of guys in that wide receiver room who can do that and more. So when you look at the skill set of Tyler Johnson, who hasn't shown us a lot of good, he did have the most impactful catch of the game, though, in that playoff run against New Orleans. But, like, that's what he's known for. But when you look at the skill set, when you're comparing the two players, it's clear that Johnson has a little bit more to offer at this point. With Scotty, he's reached the point in his career where you know what he's got. He's not as shiny and new anymore.
Right. It's and I don't know, maybe they look to trade him. Maybe, who knows? I doubt, I doubt you want to just cut him, right? I doubt you want to lose him for nothing. I mean, he could be a player. He could be a wide receiver 5, a wide receiver 6 on some teams, but on this particular team, it's tough sledding. It's tough sledding. So obviously you talk about, the things that people can do. Tyler Johnson, while he has had issues route running and catching the ball and focusing, he can block better than Miller. And then Jalen Darden, while I know he's getting a lot of
he's getting a ton of love
in the chat. He's
getting a ton of love.
He's getting a lot of hate in the chat right now. Yes, I understand he hasn't done much. However, he was a 4th round pick. They traded up to get him. He's only had 1 year, and he has a role. He is the kick/punt returner. Is he good at it? He wasn't good last year, but he has a role. So I don't know if they tried Scotty Miller out at that a little bit in camp last year. I think a little bit in the preseason, but not much in regular season. They clearly like Darden for that. So I don't see Darden being the guy going. And they're hoping he can make a leap there. So the wide receiver competition will be interesting to see. Let's get into one more, and technically 2 more things, I guess, before we head out. A lot of people have talked about Gronkowski. It's status quo with him until you hear he's either re-signing or he's retiring. There's not going to be any news. We won't have anything different to say about Rob Gronkowski. This signing doesn't impact Gronkowski really at all. This signing doesn't impact that. Like we talked about with the void years or the incentives, the cap hit's not going to be $10 million for Akeem Hicks. So it doesn't impact that. If Gronkowski wants $6 million, the Bucks can make that work. I'm not saying that what he wants, but that's not the money isn't an issue. But real quick, the last thing I wanted to talk about is something that I think is probably unlikely, but there are still a ton of free agents out there. When you look at the list, you can recognize a lot of the names out there right now as we head into June. I wouldn't expect the Bucks to add really much else in terms of like significant pieces besides Gronkowski. Maybe a depth piece here or there, maybe, who knows? But what do you think? Do you think that, the Bucks could add somebody? Do you think it'd just be depth? Like I said, I think you're looking likely that the last big addition is Rob Gronkowski. And then maybe, you sign like an outside linebacker who is like in the league for 7 years. He's been on 4 teams or something, like, just some random depth guy.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of under the impression that, either Suh or Gronk was going to be the last big signings we had heard about that everybody gets super stoked for. We know that Suh is probably going to move on, so that question has been answered. The defensive line has been addressed. Kind of just waiting on Gronk right now, but outside of that, no. I agree with you. I think it's going to be mostly depth from this point forward. I mean, if you put Scotty Miller in a trade situation, I'm curious what that could look like, because obviously they can still trade. That would
probably be, it'd probably be like a 7th round pick.
Right, but it's not like you're getting a ton of depth for those guys. So I think, as far as looking ahead at what this team is going to look like week 1, 2022 season, I think we're as close as we're going to get. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Things could obviously change. This Bucs team has sure surprised us a hell of a lot over these last few years. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So, and Tony Baloney in the chat brings up no one is trading for Scotty. And you may be right. I mean, I don't know. But that's why I brought up really the 7th round pick. A lot of times if teams really like a guy and they hear that, the Bucs could be cutting him, do teams want to just give up a 7th round pick in 2023 or 2024 and say, okay, we got him? Or do they want to wait for the Bucs to cut him and then they have to compete with 31 other teams? So that's the reasoning why you see some of those guys be traded in that instance. So maybe it's like a swap. Maybe the Bucs send Scotty Miller and a 7th to somebody for a 6th or something like that. That's in that scenario, it's just teams don't want to compete with other teams if they really like a guy. So you give up a late round draft pick and there it is. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. I don't know how likely it is. Like I said, we have an entire training camp to go through and preseason. So there is still a lot that can happen. Injuries can pop up, different scenarios can pop up. And we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Obviously, the Bucs won't have Chris Godwin for the first few weeks of the season. How does that impact their decision making? We won't know. But yeah, I mean, for now, this Bucs team appears ready to roll. I wouldn't expect much more additions besides Rob Gronkowski if he decides to come back and play. If he doesn't, however, I will say this: if he decides, I'm done, this is it for me, I would actually expect them to add, and I'm not sure what the list is. I know it's probably not a pretty list. I would expect them to add a tight end, like another veteran tight end. So that could be an addition if Rob Gronkowski were to say, I'm done. But other than that, I think this Bucs team is pretty much ready to roll. And with the signing of Akeem Hicks, I mean, it bolsters the defensive line if he can stay healthy.
Now, short podcast today. I'm not going to lie to you guys. For a couple of reasons. One, we didn't expect to do a podcast today. The signing of Akeem Hicks got us excited, wanted to jump on here and talk about it. Of course, give you all the latest Buccaneer news, but also because we are planning another mailbag show with former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Sean King. And obviously, if you're still listening to the podcast at this point, we really do appreciate you. For our folks listening live, you'll be the first to know that it may or may not be a weekly segment this season, having Sean King on for the Cannon Fire mailbag. So simply put, we'll keep you updated as more details come out. But our next podcast should be another mailbag with Coach Sean King. So send us your questions. Get a hold of us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. You can tweet at us. You can DM us on Instagram. Or you can send us an email. I mean, I don't know if we're going to do pigeon letters at this point, but you can send us an email, cannonfirepodcast@gmail.com, your Bucs questions, takes, and more. And that should be a fun show. But let's wrap things up with a pretty fun update from OTAs today. So we know the Bucs are back in the facility. They've been there working out. Tom Brady is there sometimes. It doesn't seem like he's been there week 2, week 3 of OTAs, but that's okay.
They're not mandatory just yet. I think that might be next week. I think they're mandatory.
It meant a lot to me that he it meant a lot to more than just me, but it meant a lot to a ton of people that Tom decided to show up for that first week, because I think one of the coaches, I think Clyde Christensen, had said he kind of hoped he didn't show up for OTAs that first week, so he had more time with guys like Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. But Tom was there week 1, but actually at a camp today. Warren Sapp, Buccaneers legend, Big 99, the QB killer, whatever you want to call him. He was out there today working it up with the defensive line. And when they talked to Todd Bowles about it, he basically just said him and Sapp have a really good relationship. All the coaches were really excited about it. And when you can get a fresh perspective talking to these guys, especially younger guys like Logan Hall, you get a fresh perspective. Not only that, it's a fresh perspective from a guy who's been there before and who did it better in the middle of that defensive line than a guy like Warren Sapp. But that's really cool, and I think that's one of those things that definitely means a lot to Logan Hall and even Joe Tryon-Shoyinka over there at the outside linebacker position. But yeah, there's a lot of hype around this defensive line right now, a hell of a lot more than there was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. We'll have to wait and see. I'm excited to see the defensive line. I hope that they are able to bring the interior pass rush that I feel like the defense has been missing. So Adam Davies brings up the big golf match coming up.
Oh, yeah, man.
Who's, if anybody's watching it, it's going to be tomorrow. If you're listening to this a few days, then it doesn't matter. But we're recording this on May 31st. So the match is Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers versus Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be played June 1st, which is tomorrow. I'll watch a little bit of it. It's always funny to see Brady, to see, not just Brady, just non-traditional golfers just joke around. Charles Barkley will likely be there joking around. I like watching regular golf, so to be able to watch that and have a little bit more fun with it's always a good time.
Oh yeah, the shit talking aspect is great. I mean, everybody involved, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, have both touched on how they're bringing their best shit talk game for the green. I mean, it's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. And if you've watched any of the last 2 years when they did the match, Tom is hilarious, but I hope he can golf a little bit better this year because he is 0-2 so far.
I will say the weather conditions that the first year,
I think it was last year when it was just pouring rain.
I think it was that was the first year, I think.
Okay. All right.
I think that was the first year, but that was Brady and was it Brady and Mickelson versus Tiger and Peyton, I think. And then last year was Brady and Mickelson versus Rogers and I forget. It was Bryson DeChambeau.
There you go.
So yeah, that's it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see, especially since we have 4 amateur golfers now, no professionals. It'll be fun to see, and it should be pretty funny. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much to our live audience over on YouTube for checking in with us. Post notification squad, you are appreciated. And shout out to everybody in the live chat really quick. NFL God, our buddy Adam Davies, the moderator holding it down. Willie Beeman also here. Charles Jansen hanging out with us. Neil. Neil just got here, but we are wrapping up the pod. Sorry, buddy. Adam, Bub, NFL God, I think I already mentioned as well. Cy Roby. And anybody else I forgot to mention, we truly do appreciate your support. Check out the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show and, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_Daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. I had to think about what I say after. Speaking of Bucs news, sometimes I space out on the intro. Sometimes it's autopilot, and I don't even realize I'm saying it. You can also find Evan on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything cooking this week?
I should have something else coming out tonight. I have the Akeem Hicks signing article up already, but I should have something else coming out later tonight or early tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that.
Alrighty. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETT, AKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back within reason. Okay, some people, you know what I'm talking about. You know when people follow you on Twitter and like you don't want to follow them back because, well, you know as well as anybody about not wanting to follow people back on social media. But I don't know. I feel like real life people are bots sometimes. Like I don't know. I'll follow you back if you. Yeah, I'll follow you back.
You'll follow. Fun fact, actually, I didn't follow Rhett. We were doing the podcast for like 3 years. I never followed.
I think it was longer than that. I think you and I have known each other since
to be fair,
2013 or 14, almost 10 years at this point.
It might have been like 2014, but
yeah, might have been.
But to be fair, it's not like you used Twitter all that much before like 2017. Okay.
No, that's the process, though. That's like
I know. I went through the same thing.
That's literally how it works for everybody. Yes. You sign up for Twitter, you look at it, and you're like, man, this is boring. This sucks. And then you delete it, and then you forget about it for 6 months, and then you get the itch to really download it again, and then all of a sudden you just can't escape.
And then you have it on dark mode.
Yes, yeah, that's a must.
Yeah, every time I look at somebody else's Twitter that's on light mode, I'm like, I am blinded.
It's like looking at headlights.
Yeah.
But yeah, go follow me on Twitter at Redicus. I put out a really cool thread on the 2010 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the team that made me a diehard fan. It'd mean a lot if you go follow me and check it out. But that's the show, folks. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will talk to you in the next one, our Cannon Fire mailbag with Coach Sean King. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.